Hello, you're very welcome along to the Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and this week joined by Mark O'Hare and Adrian Clarke. And before we get into the Carabao Cup final, a lot of Premier League games. It's actually a pretty decent Premier League card, I thought, across the 8 games. Mark O'Hare, we'll just speak a little bit about the Champions League and lead on to these games. We won't be covering Manchester City this week in the marquee games. What did you think of them against Leipzig? Because first half, I thought they really controlled it. It looked like a Champions League winning performance. And then second half was just completely different.
Yeah, Man City failing to make the most of a very dominant position. I think we've seen that story before, haven't we? So I think more so, I was, rather than being impressed by City in the first half, I was more frustrated by Leipzig. Really, they looked like rabbits in headlights in the first half. Were anything but front foot. They were so passive and conservative and concerned, really. When the ball was turned over, they just gave it straight back to City, and who looked threatening every time they came forward, even if Haaland was kind of quieter than he normally is. But then the tables turned second half. Leipzig grew in confidence, showed much more ambition, and really put City under stress, really. And the goal, the equaliser, was coming even before it arrived. I think Andre Silva hit the bar or the woodwork, and I'm sure there's kind of complaints about a potential foul with the goal, but I thought Leipzig were going to score at some point. They were creating chances and looking good and bullish about things. I guess the grand scheme of things, Man City won't be too upset by the final score, even if they were probably disappointed by the second half. They'll fancy their chances of getting a result at the Etihad. But yeah, I guess performance-wise, that coming on the hot of the heels of the game at Nottingham Forest last weekend, where they really should have sewn the game up and won that game quite comfortably. And again, just a lack of concentration, whether it's just complacency, really, of dominating matches so often, but they just take their eye off the ball. But I think there's questions about Ederson and his ability between the sticks, probably having one of his poorest campaigns so far. I think City have faced 14 shots on target in the last 7 or 8 games in the Premier League, which on the surface of it is very, very impressive. You know, they're not conceding many, but they've conceded 8 goals from those 14 shots on target, which obviously isn't all down to Ederson, but it shows that when they are giving up opportunities, they tend to be pretty good ones too. So things to work on, and I think we've talked on it week on week, really, that City haven't been the well-oiled machine we probably saw in the autumn time too often since. Obviously, the win at the Emirates was impressive, particularly in that second half. But even if you look at the goals that they scored, they probably came from Arsenal's sloppiness and errors. So, yeah, a lot to work on from a City perspective. But I think they'll still be confident about progressing.
Yeah, you mentioned Erling Haaland. I think Thierry Henry on CBS last night did a very good piece pre-game on Erling Haaland's movement. Well worth checking out on Twitter if you haven't seen that already. Adrian, 2 things I want to shout out to you. Firstly, props to Inter versus Porto, 1-0 to Inter. It was actually a great game watching the highlights back. So you did well to get the 1-0 out, but fair play. That's another in the long shots. But and also lead on to a little bit of reflection on that and lead on to Anfield and Liverpool's performance against Real Madrid.
Well, no, I mean, it's probably more chances in the Inter game than we anticipated, but we all called it as a low scoring affair. And yeah, our selections came in, but yeah, I was happy to nail the 1-0. And I think during my little slot on the last show, I'd even said, I don't know, I kind of see it being a late goal, maybe in the second half from one of Martinez, Dzeko or Lukaku. So even name check Lukaku. So very, very happy about that. Fluked it. The Liverpool game, I mean, I've been saying for a while that Liverpool still got a lot to mend with their defensive play. It was alarming how many chances they gifted Newcastle, despite having a man advantage at the weekend. It was a great result on paper, going to St James's Park and winning, but yeah, just very loose without the ball. And Real Madrid, with all the big guns coming back into that starting 11, were always going to cause them bigger problems. And I mean, no one would have foreseen them conceding 5. But I'm genuinely not that surprised because they're miles off it, absolutely miles off where they need to be in their defensive work, Liverpool. So, look, they might scramble their way to a top 4 finish. They're going to have to score a lot of goals to do it because I don't see that many clean sheets coming.
Yeah,
it was one of those games where if you looked at the stats and hadn't seen the game, you would have thought, bloody hell, Real Madrid scored 5 goals. They only had 9 shots and 6 shots on target. But watching the flow of the game, even at 2-0 up, they scored 2 great goals, Liverpool. Well, 1 great goal and 1 horrendous goalkeeping error. But the just the lack of control just was obvious from an early stage of that fixture. So yeah, it's one to sort of ignore the stats. I think Liverpool actually won the expected goals count as well, which just a complete red herring.
Yeah, like you said, sometimes the eye test mark tells you a lot and the flow of a game for sure. But look, the alarm bells were probably on with that second half for Liverpool against Newcastle. Said we cover Liverpool City in particular. We won't be covering the games. The games we are going to cover are Manchester United versus Newcastle in the Carabao Cup final, Spurs, Chelsea, Leicester, Arsenal, Leeds, Southampton. Good mix of EFL European bets. Our long shot section, which you obviously, as you've heard, has been doing quite well recently. It took a while to get going, but the guys are firing in winners left, right, and centre. And then, of course, the podcast Best Bets, where we have our last week of our new sign-up offer, which is podcast Best Bets double the odds. So stay tuned to the end of the show to see that. And to point out that timestamps for all the games are available in the description if you do like to skip ahead. And to point you quickly in the direction of our Cheltenham content on Matchbook Insights. Matt Toombs has written 4 fantastic pieces on Cheltenham trends articles, well worth checking out for anyone who's really into Cheltenham, or if it's your first time and you really want to learn a little bit more before you have a bet, do check that out on Matchbook Insights. And last thing I'll say is to hit that like button if you are watching on the YouTube stream and comment your best bet for the weekend. Let's get straight into it. We will start with the Carabao Cup final, Manchester United versus Newcastle at Wembley Stadium. We'll take a look at the betting as we have it on matchbook.com. This is the 90-minute match odds, and you'll see Manchester United available at 2.28, Newcastle 3.45. The draw is available at 3.4. Both teams to score yes is the favourite at 1.82. No is even money at 2.0. The Asian handicap line sees Newcastle get a quarter of a goal head start at 1.97, and the total is 2.5, shaded towards the under. So, Mark, I'll start with you. You're backing unders in this game. Is this purely based on a cup final, Carabao Cup final, big game sort of feel that it's a default selection almost with the unders?
I wouldn't say it's a default, but it's certainly something to bear in mind. Yes, 3 of the last EFL Cup finals have been 0-0 or 1-0. And I do think this will be a very competitive final. Going to have a great atmosphere here because United always generate a good atmosphere when they're away from Old Trafford, and Newcastle have been waiting for a moment like this for a long, long time. So it'll be a very memorable occasion for the Toon Army. I would normally give Man United a slight edge, but there are a couple of kind of caveats that put me off Man United at the prices. The first of which is obvious. Very, very taxing week and a very hectic schedule for Man United recently. So they've obviously played, or will have played, Barcelona twice in the space of a week, and Leicester last weekend when they were put under a lot of first half pressure before coming through. So that fatigue element is or could be key. Newcastle have enjoyed 2 fresh midweeks. And actually, by the time this game kicks off, Man United will have played 7 games in February. Newcastle will have only played 3. That's a lot of football, a lot of difference. And Ten Hag has rotated his team a little bit, but he's always kept a very strong spine. He's highly motivated to win trophies this season. So fully expect Man United to go very strong against Barcelona on Thursday night. Obviously, we don't know the outcome of that, but they are trending in the right direction and have been doing so for quite some time. That is obviously a huge positive. Just 1 defeat in 19 across all competitions. That was the last-minute defeat at Arsenal. Casemiro is back from a domestic suspension. I think Sabitzer has made a good impact. He's starting to settle into that midfield. Wakehorst in his more withdrawn role has obviously aided the team too. And whatever Ten Hag seems to be doing, they seem to be functioning very, very well, even if it means putting Luke Shaw in at centre half, kind of. Which would never have been on anyone's kind of to-do list at the start of the season. So there are a lot of positives for United, but that fatigue element does concern me. And look, Newcastle have been very, very difficult to beat this season. Liverpool, the only team to beat them in the Premier League. And on both occasions, you could say the Magpies were a little bit unfortunate. Newcastle have already gone away to Old Trafford and thwarted United, drew 0-0, gone to the Emirates and drawn 0-0, and also taken a point off Man City at St James's. They get Bruno Guimaraes back. They get probably Joe Willock back. Joe Linton is expected to be fine. So in terms of outfield players, Newcastle won't be far off their best 11. The obvious caveat to backing a Newcastle-based bet is Nick Pope is out, and they're going to be down to Loris Karius, third or fourth choice, really. So, and true too that their attack has been faltering as well recently. They have been creating chances but not converting. They've scored twice or more in only 2 of the last 11 across all competitions, and that's a very big reason behind the fact that they're drawing too many games domestically and are starting to lose their grip on the top 4, or they've fallen out of the top 4. But on the flip side, their clean sheet record is very strong. Their defensive numbers not just recently, but across the whole campaign, and their process when out of possession has been very strong too. So I believe they can be competitive in this match. And if I was going to be pro United, who I think we'd all probably agree are the stronger team, have the better personnel, I think you've got to have the draw on side in some way or form. So backing United minus a quarter, it's 1.93. In the end, I just thought just take under 2.5 goals at 1.85 because you've got the 0-0, the 1-1 on side. You've got the narrow Man United win, as well as an upset victory if Newcastle were to put it off in 90 minutes too. So mentioned the sort of low goal stats in EFL Cup finals. That goes the same across all competitions, all cup competitions and finals. I want to be with United, of course, but this match takes place less than 72 hours after you play Barcelona. So, it's a very hectic schedule. Newcastle have this match on their mind, resting, recovering, preparing all week. I do think that's an asset for them.
Yeah, Adrian, I think Mark set up that game well. I guess you are leaning towards Newcastle and plus a quarter on the Asian handicap line. That refresh in midfield and even that start of February games, 3 games versus 7, it's huge.
Yeah, I align with pretty much everything that Mark was saying there. But my selection, rather than goals, would be to go with Newcastle plus a quarter of a goal. Anything other than a United win in normal time, and you're in the money. So you're covering all the draw options and the possible upset. They've lost their last 8 games at Wembley over a long period of time, Newcastle. So they might feel they're due one, but they might also feel a little bit jinxed there. We'll have to wait and see. They've not been scoring many goals, Newcastle, but they are so tough to beat. As Mark said, Liverpool the only side to beat them this season. So to get plus a quarter at backable odds, 1.9,
1.97 now, Adrian.
Yeah, 1.97. Yeah, I mean, almost even money on a team that's lost twice all season in a cup final where things are traditionally very tight and cagey. Really does appeal to me. Obviously, the Karius factor is there. There's part of me that thinks the narrative could be that he's the hero. It wouldn't be the shock of the century for him to pull out a performance. He's not, he's not exactly match fit, but he's also not a poor keeper. He got to be Liverpool's number 1 for a reason. And the team, I suspect, will work overtime, doubly hard to protect their goalkeeper, and it could galvanise them to a degree. So, Guimaraes, nice and fresh, maybe Willock too. I can see this being really competitive. The issue is, can they keep United at bay? They've scored in 22 or 24 Premier League games this season, Manchester United. So it's not going to be easy to keep that clean sheet. But as Mark said, they got one earlier this season at Old Trafford. And having watched them in the flesh at Emirates, grind out that goalless draw, I would back them to do it underneath the arch as well, potentially. So, my pick is Newcastle on that small handicap. But, it feels like a low goal game as well.
It does feel like a low goal game, and I think I'm going to lean towards the under for a podcast selection, under 2.5 goals at 1.85, just given the closeness of this game. But like you touched on, Adrian, Newcastle are very solid, and they do have that performance in them. So look, I'm fascinated how that game plays out. That's Sunday 4:30 kickoff, and we're going to go back in time a little bit. Sunday 1:30, the game before that on Sky Sports. It's actually a brilliant game on its own. It's Tottenham versus Chelsea. We'll take a look at the betting currently available in the Matchbook Betting Exchange. Tottenham are 2.6 in the 90-minute match odds, 3.05 Chelsea. The draw is 3.4. Both teams to score, yes, is favoured a good bit in this market at 1.77. Asian handicap line is a draw no bet market with Spurs favoured at 1.82, and the total is 2.5, shaded a bit to the under at 1.87. So, Adrian, back to you. And look, this is a game. It's tough to, I think, out of all the 20 teams in the Premier League, I'd have these two right at the top as the teams so hardest to place exactly where they are, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I mean, although Chelsea are easy to oppose, aren't they, at the moment? A bit of a mess. Pressure heaped on Graham Potter. He's got too many players, Graham Potter. He does not know how to use them. And I feel for him because it can't be easy to juggle the kind of squad that he's got at the moment and keep players happy, to find any kind of flow. And they're not in a good place. Losing at home to Southampton is a truly terrible result. I rather than sort of siding with Spurs, which it doesn't come naturally to me for obvious reasons, I am opposing Chelsea here. I tweeted this earlier. Chelsea haven't beaten anyone in the top half this season. You go all the way back to the start of last season, Chelsea's record against teams that are in the top 10 or finished in the top 10 is 5 wins from 28 games. They have not been beating decent teams for a long, long time, Chelsea. This isn't just a Potter thing. What's the reason? Was probably goals. Not creating many, are they? I think they've got 40. Their Premier League games this season have seen just 46 goals. That's a low. And in terms of like creating chances, in their XG in open play ranks them 9th in the Premier League. So it's not as if they're creating a stack of efforts and then wasting them. So yeah, I find it quite easy to oppose Chelsea. Spurs have won their last 2 home games. You know, they beat City, they beat West Ham. Wasn't flashy against West Ham, but you know that they're going to be well organised defensively. You know they're not going to try and gift anything to Chelsea, and they've got the firepower up top, I think, to nick a goal or 2 here and there. So yeah, I was surprised by their midfield handling the game against West Ham pretty well. And then the other factor is Stiolini, the guy who's been standing in for Conte. If he's in charge again, it's good news potentially, because I did hear, I think it was on the radio, that he's got a perfect record as an interim manager in place of Conte, not just at Spurs, but also during their time in Italy together. He's never lost. So yeah, Tottenham and under 4.5. I wanted to pair it with under 4.5 because I wouldn't see this as a high scoring game. It's Chelsea after all, and I don't see Spurs going gung ho. The only negative is that Spurs have a shocking record against Chelsea going back a long, long time. They've lost all 3 games at home to Chelsea at their new stadium. But yeah, as I've said, I just don't rate Chelsea at the moment. So Spurs and under 4.5 for me.
Okay, yes. So Spurs on the match odds 2.6. If you want that boost with pairing it with under 4.5 goals, it's 2.84. Mark, I sense with your selection here that you struggle to separate these 2 teams as well.
Yeah, well, I've put in one selection on the sheet, but I had 2 leans, very similar price, and kind of buys into exactly what Adrian is saying here. Under 2.5 goals was the one I nominated, but I've also got on my own notes Spurs +0 around a similar price. I think it's +185. Under 2.5 goals is 1.87. Spurs, as you said at the start there, Dan, they're one of the hardest teams to get right in this division. Exceptional when beating City here not long ago, diabolical against Milan and Leicester, and then they beat a really powder puff West Ham team last weekend. So they're in the top 4, despite all the sort of concerns we've had about their performances and consistency. Chelsea are closer to the relegation zone than they are the top 4. Yet the market is basically saying by these prices that Chelsea are the stronger suit, with Spurs being a 2.6 shot at home. I find that quite hard to back up, like Adrian. So, regardless of whether you can trust Tottenham or not, I just think they are or have been better than Chelsea this season. So they deserve a bit more respect from that. I'm aware of the head-to-head record. I don't tend to read too much into it when I price my own bets up, but that's possibly the only thing you can really say, the difference between the 2 teams, because as Adrian's outlined, Chelsea have been middling for quite some time. 2 Premier League wins in the last 14. Just dreadful, really. They scored 3 goals in the last 7. They failed to score in 9 of the last 14 across all competitions. And basically, no Premier League team has scored fewer goals than Chelsea since the start of November. In those 14 games I mentioned, they've scored twice or more just once. That was against Bournemouth. So the pressure is building on Graham Potter. They're 11 points behind Tottenham. They're also below them across almost all major performance data metrics. They've got a negative expected goals process this season. That is improving. They are starting to create opportunities and chances, as we saw away in Dortmund, where they really deserved not just to get a draw out of the game, probably should have won it. But it's all kind of manifesting itself into something kind of a bit more negative, really. Fans are already getting frustrated with progress around Chelsea and the lack of results. So, yeah, just the 2.6 surprised me. I thought Spurs would be 2.25, 2.3. It's a big price. So if I was attacking Tottenham, I would take the +0 start just for a bit more insurance. I still think it's a reasonable offering at 1.85. I'd make it much closer to about 1.7, actually, even shorter. But I think it's not going to be a fun watch. I don't think it's going to be a massively high-scoring game. So under 2.5 goals, again, came into the equation with Chelsea's goal-scoring woes. As Adrian says, Chelsea's matches are actually the lowest scoring in the Premier League this season, 2.0 goals per game on average. And unders has landed in 13 of the last 15. And Spurs matches haven't exactly been full of goals this calendar year either. 3 of the last 4 head-to-head, if you like that thing, have also gone under as well. So I guess both selections kind of buy into Adrian's angle too. So yeah, I'd be pro Spurs rather than, well, actually I'd be negative against Chelsea more than pro Spurs, but also happy to oppose goals in that game too.
Yeah, number of confident selections from the guys here. I think we'll lock in Tottenham and under 4.5 goals. I think that price in and around close to 15 to 8 at 2.84 is quite appealing. So that's Tottenham and under 4.5 goals. Mark has selected under 2.5 goals at 1.87, and all selections put up in the podcast will be available on Matchbook Insights or insights.matchbook.com. We'll move on to the third game and go to a couple of 3 o'clock kickoffs. We'll start with Leicester versus Arsenal, which wasn't the choice of myself as the host. It wasn't Adrian's choice as a former Arsenal player. It was Mark O'Hare's choice. So we'll take a look at the betting as we have at matchbook.com and then pass over to Mark's words of wisdom. Leicester 5.1. Arsenal available at 1.75 here. The draw is 4.2. Both teams to score, yes, is available at 1.74. No is 2.3. The Asian handicap line, it's given Leicester a 3/4 of a goal head start at even money, 2.0, and Arsenal at minus 3/4 is 1.94. And the total is 2.5, and that's shaded a good bit towards the over. So yeah, Mark, take it away on Leicester versus Arsenal. Where are you at with Arsenal? Because look, 70, 80 minutes gone, despite that good second half performance. If they Arsenal draw that game and Manchester City win, it's a different sort of title race look altogether.
It is, but the way in which it played out, I think, is going to be of enormous psychological benefit to Arsenal. Just the manner of that victory and the way in which City dropped points. I said to you guys off air before Monday's Champions League show that it felt to me like the kind of moment or the kind of day where you look back on in May and say that's the day Arsenal really started to believe their own hype that they could go on and win this title. And kind of the moment where you look back, or at least when I was watching the match unfold at Villa Park, I thought Arsenal are going to win the title this year because that's the kind of thing that goes in your favour. To have City drop points hours later just kind of crystallised that to view and will hugely galvanise the Arsenal players, because it had been, I wouldn't say a tough time, but there'd been a few bumpy matches since the World Cup break, at least. And but look, there's a huge amount of football still to be played, a huge amount of points still to be earned. But I just think the manner of the performance in the second half, the way in which Arsenal bounced back, will have created just an enormous amount of self-belief. And they go into a King Power Stadium having already won 9 of their 12 Premier League away trips this season, which is an immense record. And it's not just an immense record, it's the grounds that they've won at. They've already won at Brighton, Brentford, Spurs, Chelsea, Palace, Wolves and Leeds. Venues where you would say, that's a potential banana skin. Arsenal have gone there and won. I think they can beat Leicester, a Leicester team they've beaten in each of the past 4 meetings. A Leicester side that have only won 3 times at the KP all season. Man City, Newcastle and Fulham, all in the top 6, have gone to the KP and won. Leicester's only positive result against the top half came against Spurs a fortnight ago, when Tottenham fielded a bit of a ramshackle defence through injury and suspension. Leicester's record against the top half, if you exclude that game against Tottenham, they've taken 2 points and lost 12 games from 14 against the best teams in the division. So despite showing real intent and having many promising moments against Man United in the first half last week, David De Gea being outstanding between the sticks, they still lost that game 3-0. And Arsenal, I think, are expected to have Thomas Partey back in the squad this weekend, which is a huge boost. They're up against the second worst defence in the division. I see Arsenal scoring a couple of goals in this match, and if they do so, they should win the game. So I do like Arsenal's price at 175, but we can bolster the odds on offer by just adding over 1.5 goals. We get 2.06, just effectively ruling out the 1-0 away win, because Leicester do have threats. They do have players in the forward areas who can pack a real punch. We've seen that. We've talked about it in recent weeks. The front 4, now that they're fit and available, with Maddison playing behind Iheanacho and Barnes playing wondrously well from the wings as well, they will cause Arsenal problems. An Arsenal team whose defensive numbers have slowed a little bit since the World Cup break. They've failed to keep a clean sheet in 5, and if you look at the underlying metrics, they have regressed a little bit. This is the first half of the campaign, they were exceptional, so they will give you an opportunity too. But I just think if it was gets into a bit of a shootout, Arsenal should be capable of coming through. So if you want to be bolder, I did highlight the 3.45 on Arsenal to win and both teams scoring. But I'm going to play it slightly safer and take the over 1.5 goals angle and be pro Arsenal.
Okay, yeah, over even money, Arsenal over 1.5 goals, 2.06. And Adrian, Mark outlined the stats post World Cup on Arsenal's defence. I think even on the eye test, you could see Arsenal's defence over the last few weeks just hasn't been the same.
No, completely agree. Yeah, no, the numbers will tell you, but yeah, looking at the team's performances, it's clear that they're not defending as well. A lot of chances, obviously, gifted to Aston Villa last weekend. The 2 goals were really poorly defended, and it needed a brilliant save from Aaron Ramsdale. I think it was in the 82nd minute from Leon Bailey to keep the score at 2-2. And then what happened. Arsenal fully deserved that win. It was a brilliant second half display, but defensively slightly concerning. And you can probably go back a few weeks now and say that they're not quite at it. And that's a slight concern to me ahead of this game, because Leicester's front four are clicking brilliantly, aren't they? Before that blank at Old Trafford, they'd scored 8 goals in their previous 2 games. It's a new look configuration. I expect him to stick with it, with Iheanacho up top, Tete, Maddison and Barnes in behind. And they created loads of good chances at Old Trafford, didn't they? Needed 2 worldies from David De Gea to keep them out. And then decisions went against them. That Sabitzer one, that was a clear red, wasn't it? It was a ridiculous decision. So yeah, the run of the ball didn't go their way in the game. I think they're dangerous here. I hope Mark's right. I'm confident, and I do think that win at Villa will have galvanised the team and given them even more belief. But because of the defensive instability at the moment, I'm not going to back Arsenal here. I'm just going to back goals. I just expect it to be there to be plenty of them. So there's 2 selections I wanted to flag. Over 2 3/4 goals at 1.91. I think you can easily make a case for 3 goals or more in the game. Leicester in 14 matches against top 11 sides this season, Leicester haven't kept a single clean sheet. So you would expect Arsenal to score. And based on what Mark's just said, you wouldn't expect Arsenal to keep a clean sheet necessarily either. Then you just need one more either way for this bet to land. Another one that I wanted to promote was first half goals, because these are 2 really fast starting sides. We saw it with Leicester last week at Old Trafford. How many shots did they have in that first half? It was a lot, well into double figures, wasn't it? Leicester actually ranked 2nd in the Premier League for first half goals. They've scored 23 of them. Arsenal ranked 3rd. They've scored 21 first half goals. I think both teams are going to come out with an attacking mentality, trying to score goals from the off. And I do think it could be a bit of a shootout. So if you think about it, 44 goals between them in 23 games. It's an average of pretty much 2 a game. You can get over 1.5 first half goals at a nice little price, 2.44. So if you fancy 2 goals or more before the break, that's a good deal, I think.
Okay, yeah, a couple of selections for Adrian. I particularly like that over first half goals at around close to 6-4, around 2.44, over 1.5 first half goals. And we will lock in Mark's game pick here. It's Arsenal and over 1.5 goals at over even money 2.06. And he did give a good shout out to Arsenal and both teams to score. Yes, so do check that out. Particularly those sort of in different markets, the match result, total goals, or the match result, both teams to score. Invariably, Matchbook will be best price in the odds checker grid throughout the week, but in particular that hour or 2 before kickoff when the markets get more liquid. So do check out the Matchbook betting exchange. We'll move on to our 4th game, the game of choice of Adrian Clarke here. So we will take a look at the betting first at Leeds versus Southampton. And I find this a tough game to call. Leeds are available at 2.08, very sure for a team in Leeds' current form. Southampton 3.9. The draw is 3.7. Both teams to score yes is 1.89, and no is available at 2.08. The Asian handicap line sees Southampton get half a goal start at 1.89, and the total in this game is 2.5, shaded a bit towards the under. So, Adrian, take it away. We never got a chance to talk on air about Nathan Jones' fleeting appearance as Southampton manager. One of these that was appointed to take them down or keep them up, but is sacked before they go down. Sort of. There's been a few of those appointments over the years. He's definitely at the top of the list anyway.
Yeah, I felt for him really. It just didn't, the supporters didn't take to him at all. And yeah, I think he was talking too much really in the end, Nathan, and results weren't going their way. He's a very, very good coach and he'll come again, but it just feels like it wasn't the right fit at the right club at the right time. Obviously Celes came in last weekend masterminded a great 1-0 win at Chelsea. So kudos to him. He wants the gig, we're led to believe. And to get it, he'll probably need a positive result at Leeds, won't he? This is a hard game to call because these are two pretty poor sides, and whichever way you look at the numbers, it's hard to find that many positives. I was tinkering with BTTS no here because Leeds have had a few blanks, and so too have Southampton over the course of the season. And with it being such a high pressure, high stakes game, I don't see it being a free for all. I think it'll be quite nervy and cagey. But I've landed on Leeds actually in the end. All things said and done, I look at their lineup. I look at their forward line with Nonto and Somerville and Harrison in behind Bamford. Even though they were pretty abject against Everton last weekend at home at Ellen Road, they're usually on it. Backed by a fired up crowd. Okay, Javi Gracia might be in charge. He might not. We don't know what the work permit issue, when that approval will come through, whether he's in charge or not. I think there could be a new manager bounce. Certainly a bit more excitement around the ground, even if Gracia isn't the guy that anyone foresaw or particularly wanted. I still think it's a change, and I think that the players will be pumped up to impress him and to get the crowd going. And I don't trust Southampton's defence. Maitland-Niles had a good game the other day at right back, but I've never been a huge fan of his in terms of his defending, especially in concentration. So Nonto up against him, I think, is a duel Leeds would potentially win. So look, the stats will tell you that Leeds have struggled struggled to score goals of late. Certainly struggled to keep clean sheets, but it's more of a hunch than anything. What I will say is that Leeds are unbeaten at home this season, despite having a nightmare campaign. They're unbeaten at home to sides outside of the top six. So they've not had an absolute shocker in front of their own fans against a team outside of the top six. So that gives me confidence to support Leeds United here. Home advantage, new manager, and I think they've got the firepower to hurt the Saints, who, let's face it, without James Ward-Prowse and his free kicks, aren't offering a great deal, are they, going forward? Who would you bank on to deliver for them? We've got two new strikers. We don't know much about them yet in terms of what they can do in the Premier League. If Ward-Prowse doesn't do it for them, who is? So, it's Leeds for me.
Okay, Leeds is the selection at 2.08. And Mark, you have put in under 2.5 goals here, which is the third under 2.5 goals shout in 4 games. We're trying to sell this Premier League weekend to our viewers and listeners, Mark. But Mark is outside the Arsenal game predicting dull encounters throughout the card.
Yeah, I found this the most difficult of the 4 games we're going to cover. Massive match at the bottom. I would probably go against Adrian in the fact that I find it hard to back Leeds at those prices. They have generated the better metrics throughout the campaign. We've talked about them putting in positive performances, but not getting results. And that's highlighted by their issues in both boxes. Not really a happy marriage, and not really why I'd want to be backing them at those prices, considering they've won just 4 games in 23 all season, haven't won in the Premier League since early November. I do think the Javi Gracia appointment is a positive, a bonus. I think he'll do pretty well. But the goals have dried up recently. Failed to score in 4 of their last 5. The last week's performance at Everton was almost disgraceful, to be honest, considering the magnitude of that match. So there's a lot of work to be done, considering that scale of performance. And their Ellen Road efforts haven't been that great either recently, which is kind of concerning. Saints have been better away from home in terms of results. I'm not sure necessarily performances are borne out that way. But you're right, Adrian. Without Ward-Prowse, they wouldn't beat Chelsea. They wouldn't beat Everton recently either. So they could even be in a worse position than they already are. They're in bottom 3 for sort of chance creation and XG numbers as well. So they're not doing a huge amount outside of his expertise either. This just feels like a tight, scrappy, horrible game where the draw is a big runner and therefore unders appeals to me. But what did stand out to me actually, Leeds' last 4 matches have averaged just 2.2 XG, and their last 8 games have averaged just 2.37 XG, which is quite a decent dip on what their season-long matches are averaging, which is around 2.88 expected goals. Does show things have been a little bit tighter in both boxes. And actually, it's a similar story for Southampton with 2.24 expected goals over the last 4 and 2.29 over the last 8. So neither of these have been involved in hugely expansive encounters recently. Chuck in the 6-pointer scenario. If you think the draw might be a bit of a runner, I always think unders is possibly the one to look at, because it does get you on side of a tight, narrow win for either team as well. So, yeah, but it's not a strong view at all. It's a dreadful match to try and preview.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Who picked this?
Sorry
game?
for bringing it up. I just thought it was such a big game that we had to talk about it. But yeah, it's in terms of fun and anger, it's a toughie.
Look, Adrian, I enjoy your picks throughout over the last few weeks and months, but I can't get on board with Leeds at 2.08 at all, to be honest. Haven't watched them. My dad's a big Leeds fan, so I do watch them a lot. I'm going to lock in under 2.5. I know, Mark, you aren't that confident, but I do like that shout at 1.89. But Adrian's selection, again, as I've touched on, will be available on Matchbook Insights. And then just a quick recap of what we've gone with on the podcast. The under 2.5 goals at 1.89 Leeds versus Southampton. Went with Mark's selection again. Arsenal over 1.5 Leicester versus Arsenal. Tottenham and under 4.5 goals versus Chelsea for Adrian at 2.84, and under 2.5 goals in the Carabao Cup final 1.85. Insights.matchbook.com, as I've already mentioned. That'll be available Thursday afternoon, and we do see a lot of those people going to that on the Saturday and Sundays and to just get a recap of the bets. So do check that out. We will go to EFL, and I really enjoyed some of these picks, Adrian, going through the sheet earlier. West Brom versus Middlesbrough. Quick word on Michael Carrick, and he's just done an incredible job there.
He's flying. Yeah. He looks a really good manager, Michael Carrick. He's made a few tweaks. He's put Marcus Fors out on the right wing. He's moved Chuba Akpom from striker into this number 10 role. And he's brought in Cameron Archer on loan from Villa, who's a terrific young striker, really, really sharp, got good movement, played well for Preston last season on loan. And they're scoring goals for fun. They're winning games. They're playing with the swagger. They look a very well coached side at the moment, Middlesbrough, and look, they're hunting down Sheffield United for second spot, and they've got a chance. I believe that. My pick here for this game is both teams to score. Borough are the both teams to score kings of the Championship. 64% of their games have seen this land. No one else has seen more. And when you look at their away games, that 64% actually rises to 71%. Of their away games sees both teams score. They've scored in all but 6 games this season, so 27 of 33. So you'd back them at the Hawthorns, where Albion don't have the strongest defence, in my opinion. They're well coached under Corbram, but they're not. It's not a strong back four, in my opinion. So I think that Borough can score goals here, but they don't keep that many clean sheets as well coached as they are. Just 8 this season in 33 Championship games, and West Brom are often worth a goal themselves. They're pretty high on the both teams to score rankings as well. And I looked at their record against the better teams in the Championship, those in the top 10. West Brom this season, 11 of their 13 games against the top 10 have seen both teams score. So they're capable of finding the back of the net, but they're not keeping very many clean sheets against the better teams. So, and they've scored in their last 7 home games under Corbram. So yeah, for me, quite a strong one, this one. Both teams to score.
Okay, yeah, very confident selection for Adrian. Both teams to score. West Brom at home to Middlesbrough, and the second one is from League One. Peterborough at home to Plymouth. Plymouth will come up a lot on the podcast, and you like goals in this game.
I do, yeah. I always like goals with Peterborough are concerned. Their home games average almost 3. I think it's 2.93 per game. It's the 4th highest in League One, which is statistically the highest scoring division in the EFL. So, Peterborough home games tend to be pretty entertaining. As the Plymouth away games, 2.81 is the average there. They attack games home and away. In terms of Peterborough at home, it's a league high 60% have gone over 2.5. No, actually, I got that wrong. Across the division, 60% of Peterborough's games go over 2.5, which is a league high. At home, they also have a league high, but the percentage rises to 64%. So, they're not brilliant defensively, Peterborough, but they always go out there and try to score goals. 6 of their 9 games against the top 8 this season for the Posh have gone overs. And Plymouth, who reached Wembley, I don't know if you saw this, they got to the Papa John's final via a penalty shootout win against Cheltenham this week. They rested 5 or 6 of their starters, so they'll come into the game nice and fresh and I think they'll go for goals themselves, particularly as most of the players they rested were forward. So both managers, Ferguson and the manager Argyle Schumacher, they both have attacking mentalities, and I think they'll go for it. Over 2.5 goals.
Okay, yeah, currently available on Matchbook at 1.83. Mark, before we get into European selections, a quick comment here. Shirley Mark is anti-QPR again this weekend. Blackburn are a nice price to back them on the handicap. And for what it's worth, Mark, I know you're a fan of the Ainsworth appointment, but I have to say I am as well, just looking into it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, Gareth Ainsworth wouldn't have been my first choice, but more, I'm not going to be harsh and say he can only play one way of football because of what Wycombe have achieved. He said himself, you have to cut your cloth accordingly, really. And, he'll be operating on a very small budget at Wycombe. So it kind of, it doesn't offer the same sort of options that a club like QPR might be able to have. And that's my only concern, really, is the stylistic issues, because we've had Mark Warburton and then Mick Beale with a certain style of football, with a certain style of player in our squad. Can he mould a winning team, a winning formula from what's there already? He should be able to, because there is ability in the squad. I know he's very big on his psychology and his positive thoughts process, and we need that massively, because things have been broken for a while, really. There's hope that he might be able to unite the club and sort of begin this battle for survival. Just wouldn't even be Rangers, the fact that Rangers are involved in this, but because it is a big step to appoint Gareth Ainsworth from where we've been, just an easy lead for me to leave that game alone and just see what happens, see what system he goes with. I'm not the biggest fan of Blackburn. I think it's incredible that they're in the top 6, in all honesty. There's no Bradley Dack. He's injured now for quite a few weeks as well. Just started playing his way back into form, but they're such a sluggish team. They tend to get results when you least expect them, I guess. But Adrian will be able to comment on them too. But in terms of sort of an analytics approach, they are very much down in the bottom 3 in terms of chance creation and what they do in the final third. They've just been edging games and managed to sort of burgle their way into the top 6. I don't see them being there at the end of the season. I know they've got some players of promise in forward areas going on to bigger and better things. But I'm happy to just leave that game completely alone and just see what happens, because talk about new manager bounce and how the impact that might have on a team. And I think that's absolutely the case this weekend.
Okay, yeah. Before we get into your selection, Adrian, in one word, I've got a comment in that original last comment was James Britton on YouTube. This is Lock Yes on YouTube. One word, Adrian. Do you think Wednesday win the league? This guy is a small punt on them.
I do. Yeah,
it's
a big fat yes from me. Yeah, they're quality.
Brilliant, good stuff. Nice and brief. Mark, on to European selections. You have one here. Sunday night, League On, massive game in the title race, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's an amazing day on Sunday in France, actually. They've got 3 derbies. Rennes against Nantes, which is a really underrated derby. A lot of hatred between the two clubs. You've got Monaco against Nice, obviously just a half-hour train ride between the two cities. And then Le Classique as Marseille try and close the 5-point gap on PSG at the top end of the table. It's the biggest match in the French football calendar each season. They played each other fairly recently in the Coupe de France, of which Marseille came out on top. It was their first home win over PSG since 2011. And I believe they can give PSG a real good run for the money again on Sunday night. I wouldn't be backing PSG. I'd be happy to have a quarter goal start on Marseille at just shy of 1.8. That game in the Cup, PSG played close to a full-strength team. They take the Cup very seriously, the French Cup. It's a competition they always want to win. And they were well beaten on the night in the Velodrome. And it just kind of continued their poor form in big matches, or the matches that matter so far this season. So if you look domestically in Ligue 1, they've played 5 games against top 4 rivals. They've only won one of those, which was the reverse game in Paris, which was quite a sketchy 1-0 win over Marseille. They've lost at Monaco, they've lost at Lens, they've lost at Rennes, and they were held at home by Monaco as well. In Europe, they were beaten pretty feebly against Bayern Munich last week. Didn't really turn up until the last half hour when Mbappe came on. They were held to draws home and away by Benfica, and they didn't exactly impress in home and away games against Juventus despite positive results. So in the past fortnight, we've had fans demonstrating, ultras making strong statements outside the training ground. We've had speculation increasing on Christophe Galtier's position as head coach. Lionel Messi's future remains up in the air. Neymar is injured. Just a very, I guess, a general feeling of apathy around the club right now. And it's a million miles away from where they were in sort of August, September time, when things seem to be going really swimmingly. Players like Messi and Neymar fully focused on the campaign because of the World Cup, I guess. And there's been a bit of sort of drop off since then. Standards have slipped and things are starting to fall apart a little bit at the seams. And this just feels like a good opportunity for a Marseille team who've won 9 of 11 this calendar year across all competitions. I think they have got the tools to be competitive in this fixture. Obviously, the cup win will give them a massive bonus, a massive boost. And they come on leaps and bounds really since August time, when fans actually were demonstrating against the appointment of Igor Tudor and booed him before a ball was even kicked at the start of the campaign. So, a penny for those thoughts now, because Marseille have gone from strength to strength, and if they win this game, title race is most definitely on. So hopeful that they get a result, but I think plus a quarter goal at 1.8 is absolutely fair enough.
Okay, I would highly recommend that game. Sunday 7:45. If you've got Spurs Chelsea at 1:30, United Newcastle at 4:30, and then that game is just a perfect Sunday, really, isn't it? Long shot time, and again, these have been in great form. I think a lot of people might just skip to the long shot straight away, get their bet for the weekend covered. Adrian, we'll hand over to you for this one. This is Gillingham versus Wimbledon. The best price we have at the moment is around 8.0 on the 0-all. I would actually emphasize that maybe if you are listening on Friday, Saturday, do check out the Matchbook Betting Exchange, because this price could be bigger, but you can see 0-all being a correct score here.
I can absolutely see 0-0 being the correct score when Gillingham entertain Wimbledon. Why? Well, Wimbledon are the goalless draw kings of League Two, maybe the EFL in general, aside from Preston. They've had 7 goalless draws so far this season, Wimbledon, the highest by far in League Two, and 5 of their 16 away games, almost a third, almost 1 in 3, have ended scoreless. So yeah, this is the type of match where they'll go and grind it out. No doubt about that. 6 of Wimbledon's last 7 games have gone under 1.5 goals as well. So they've been involved in a lot of pretty cagey, pretty dull encounters of late of Johnny Jackson's side. Now, Gillingham have got better. They've started to score a few goals, but clearly they're up against a decent defence in this one. They've also improved defensively. They're keeping clean sheets. I think 4 clean sheets in their last 7, Gillingham. So they might not give too much away either. Yeah. So look, Gill's home games average 1.57, the lowest in the division. It's not been a thrill a minute at the Priestfield this season. Wimbledon away games, for obvious reasons, that also average very low, just 2.06 goals a game. So 0-0 looks good to me, and so does the price.
Okay, yeah. Shout out to Matt Toombs, who I mentioned at the start with his Cheltenham trends on Matchbook Insights, a massive Gillingham fan, and pointed me slightly in the direction of Gillian's improved form at the bottom of League Two, which sometimes takes a while to get through the rest of the Football League to reach the likes of myself. Mark, you have an interesting selection, I thought, here. Rotherham away to Swansea in the Championship. 6.0 is the current price on Matchbook.
Yeah, 6.4, massive price. A bit frustrated because last week I had Mallorca. Was it Mallorca to beat? But took a goals-based angle and it didn't pay off because of 6 goals. Yeah. But you can just take Rotherham on the nose here. A team, I know when you look at the table, battling relegation, picked up a big midweek win against Sunderland at home, and now go to Swansea on Monday night. They don't win often away from home, just twice all season, and they don't score freely on their travels either. But I just think this price is totally disrespectful for a match which is much more competitive than the market suggests, and because they're playing a Swansea team who are basically in crisis on and off the field at the minute. Russell Martin, their head coach, is not a happy bunny. The supporters are very frustrated and unhappy. On-field results have been poor for quite some time. So poor, in fact, that Swansea have only won 4 games from their last 20. But what is really quite mad is that in 3 of those 4 games, their opponents were reduced to 10 men when the scores were level, and Swansea ended up winning the game against 10 men. So they are a very heavy possession team without a huge degree of penetration at the minute. Their defence is creaking. They're not keeping consistent clean sheets, just 2 in 20. And they've conceded 3 goals in 3 of the last 5 games as well. So I think it's worth bearing in mind this is a huge kind of style clash. You've got the high energy, high pressing Rotherham team who really aren't afraid to mix it and battle and compete. Something that Tony Mowbray talked about after Sunderland's defeat against Rotherham in midweek. He's explaining how much of a nightmare they can be to play against. And I guess considering the way Swansea are playing right now, the mood around the club as well, just feels like a great opportunity. And I give them a puncher's chance here to pull off an upset. And if you look down to a few of the other sort of markets at Matchbook, it's 1.77 on Rotherham +1 on the Asian handicap, which I just think is disrespectful for a team who might be battling relegation, but Swansea are no great shakes themselves. They're only so short because of the underlying metrics, because they dominate the ball so much. And Rotherham don't need a huge amount of possession themselves to sort of hurt teams. So it feels like a good opportunity for them to get a positive result on Monday night.
Okay, yes, it's a Monday night football game. Do check that out. Rotherham 6.4 currently, and just quickly to reference the odds checker grid, we're recording this Thursday lunchtime. Matchbook are 6.4. The next best in any of the sports books is 5.5. The next best on any of the exchanges is 5.9. So that's correct as a 2 p.m. on Thursday. So well worth checking out the odds checker grid for those 90-minute markets on a price like Rotherham at 6.4 is huge compared to the 5.5 you would be ordinarily getting. Adrian, we're going to move to bets, and this is the last week available that you can have the podcast double the bets, double the odds offer, and that's up to £50 in cash, and basically back any of the guys' best bets. We will double the odds into your account if it is a winning bet in cash, up to £50. Full T's and C's in the description. Enter the bonus code podcast. Adrian, your best bet. You're going back to the Premier League, but it's a game we haven't covered yet. West Ham at home to Nottingham Forest.
Yes, yeah, fingers crossed then we can pick some winners in the best bets this week. Yeah, I fancy unders in West Ham versus Nottingham Forest. Two pretty cautious managers. David Moyes, we know what he's like. Steve Cooper's very similar away from home. Nottingham Forest don't tend to score very many goals. And look, one thing is for sure. If somebody does score first, and that is an if, they're not going to chase that hard for a second. Let me tell you. So yeah, I think unders is the way to go. The stats are strong here. 18 of West Ham's 23 Premier League games have gone under 2.5 goals this season, which is amazing. For Forest, it's not far off. 16 of 23 matches have gone under 2.5. In terms of failing to score, it's happened too often for West Ham fans. Like in 43% of the Hammers games have seen their team blank. That number drops to 39% for Forest, but it's still a high enough proportion. And away from home, Cooper's Forest, as I said, don't score very many. They've failed to score in 8 of 11 road trips. It's 1-0 Forest at the City Ground earlier on this season. I think it'll be 1-0 again. I'm not quite sure who'll win it, but yeah, I don't see 3 or more goals here.
Okay, yeah, under 2.5 goals, 1.76. And I do, like you touched on, Adrian, I always like picturing a game when I back the unders. If a team scores an early goal and it's 1-0, then the game might open up, similar to Anfield, for example, on Tuesday night, whereas this game doesn't have that feel. So yeah, that's definitely worth checking out. 1.76, under 2.5 goals. The opposite bet for Leipzig versus Frankfurt in the Bundesliga. Mark, take it away.
Yeah, two teams we covered in depth in midweek for the Champions League. I guess there is a slight concern of a fatigue might play a part here with Leipzig having a quick turnaround from Wednesday to Saturday afternoon. But yeah, I still fancy goals in this game. The Bundesliga this season is averaging 3.23 goals per game. 61% of overall matches in this division have gone over 2.5 goals. 41% have seen over 3.5 goals. But if we take that 61% hit rate for over 2.5 goals, that would imply blanket price on over 2.5 goals in a standard Bundesliga game would be around 1.64. We're getting 1.75 in a match involving two of the most attack-minded teams, with two teams with the best sets of forwards in the division outside of maybe Bayern and Dortmund. So I think it's hard to justify that price at 1.75. It should be shorter. I'm expecting it to go shorter. So I'm happy to get involved at that price because Leipzig, as we've mentioned previously, they're so well stocked with offensive talent. Nkunku, again, playing a cameo off the bench in midweek. He might be able to come back in and make his first start from injury, which would be a big bonus. But even without him and Dani Olmo, they tore Wolfsburg apart last weekend, 3-0, and could have easily scored 4, 5 or 6 goals in that match. Really impressive. They're back at home. We saw how good they can be in the second half against City when they actually played front foot football. They've scored in every home game this season. They've scored twice or more in 8 of 10 in the Bundesliga at home. 7 of those 10 fixtures went overs, 3.2 goals per game on average. If you look at their record against the best teams in the Bundesliga, 7 of 9 against the top 8 have gone over 2.5 goals. The 2 that didn't featured exactly 2. And despite being sort of just outside the top 4 and very much in contention to finish in the top 4, they've only kept 6 clean sheets this season domestically. And they're playing a Frankfurt team who scored in 18 of 21. Mawani should be fit and available after picking up a bit of a knock midweek. They've scored in 8 of 10 away. They've scored at Bayern. They've scored at Freiburg. They're only 2 trips to the top 6. They scored 9 of 10 against the top 10, home or away. But they've also only kept 2 clean sheets against the best teams in the division, and they yet to keep a clean sheet away from home too. And their goals per game record when playing away mirrors that of Leipzig at home, 3.2 goals per game, all 10 away games featuring at least 2 goals. So yeah, I'm struggling to kind of work out why over 2.5 goals is as big as it is at 1.75 when I make it much closer to about 1.6. Normally in the Bundesliga, you get sort of lines of 2 3/4, 3 goal lines as well. So when you see a 2.5 line, it has to be attacked even more so when you've got the likes of Leipzig and Frankfurt involved.
Yeah, I find it hard to disagree there on that line. I can see that line moving a lot. So thoughts with the Friday night listeners and Saturday morning listeners who invariably probably be trying to come up with ways to get another similar price on site. But that's over 2.5 goals. The current price in the Match Betting Exchange as of Thursday, 2 p.m, 1.76. That's brilliant, guys. My thanks to Adrian and Mark O'Hare. A brilliant week as always. Insights.matchbook.com for a full recap. Do check that out throughout the weekend. Mark O'Hare's Insights piece has been filed Thursday morning. Also check that out, as well as Adrian Clarke's piece, which will be filed on Friday morning. My thanks to the guys. We'll be back next week. No Champions League, so we will see you Thursday. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.